of government, from county election officials to secretaries of state, to the Department of Justice, to his own vice president, to try to prevent the certification of the election results. At each stage, Donald Trump and his allies were asked to bring forward evidence that the election was tainted by widespread voter fraud. But whether in Michigan or Pennsylvania, or as we will hear today, Arizona, the purveyors of the big lie repeatedly failed to produce one scintilla of credible evidence of widespread fraud. Yet today, more than 11 months after the election, the attacks on our election system have only intensified, and the latest weapon of choice is the partisan audit. Let me be clear, the hyper-partisan audits pushed by President Trump and his allies are not about fairness, election security, or the truth. They are instead designed to promote conspiracy theories and to raise doubts about our elections. And the ultimate aim of these audits is even worse, to lay the groundwork for new laws that make it harder for Americans to cast their ballots, but easier for dishonest officials to overturn the results of elections they don't like. Today's hearing will focus on the 5-month-long hyper-partisan audit in Maricopa County, Arizona. It was clear from the beginning that this so-called audit led by the Republican State Senate was really a fishing expedition in search of evidence of election fraud, no matter how flimsy. The State Senate rejected a bid from a qualified and certified auditor, choosing instead to hire Cyber Ninjas, an unaccredited firm with no experience auditing elections. What the company did have was a CEO who had publicly supported Trump and promoted the so-called big lie. During the audit, Cyber Ninja's sloppy, insecure practices jeopardized the integrity of ballots and voting machines, forcing Arizona taxpayers to spend millions to replace the compromised machines. The audit itself was funded with at least $6.7 million from right-wing dark money groups headed by Trump allies and supporters of Stop the Steal movement. Documents show that Trump himself may have funneled funds to the audit effort in Arizona. Yet all that partisan dark money failed to overcome the truth. Last month, Cyber Ninjas finally was forced to admit that it found no evidence of widespread fraud in the Maricopa County election results. In its final report, Cyber Ninjas wrote that they were, quote, no substantial differences, end quote, between the official count and the audit results, and that there is, quote, no reliable evidence that the paper ballots were altered to any material degree, end quote. This should have been the end of the story, but rather than admit that they were wrong about voter fraud, Cyber Ninjas and Republican leaders in Arizona are now pushing a host of unnecessary legislative changes to make it harder to vote and easier to overturn election results. And hyperpartisan audits are now spreading to more states. We are holding today's hearing so we can hear the facts about the Cyber Ninja audits in Arizona. We invited the company's CEO, Doug Logan, to testify today so that we could hear firsthand about the audit's findings. Unfortunately, Mr. Logan refused our invitation, and he also refused to produce documents that the committee requested back in July. Mr. Logan's refusal to answer questions under oath is just one more sign that the dark money-fueled audit he led never should have happened in the first place. Today we will hear from the chairman and vice chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, both Republicans, who, unlike Mr. Logan, were not afraid to tell the committee the truth about this audit. I am honored that they both agreed to put country over party by testifying today, despite threats to their personal safety. We will also hear from election and democracy experts who will tell us how partisan audits are spreading to other states, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Texas, and the threat this poses to our democracy. The attempts by former President Trump and his allies to undermine America's elections are failing to win the last one fair and square. It represents the biggest threat to our constitutional republic since the Civil War. This committee will not be silent in the face of this threat. We will continue to conduct oversight to ensure that the American people know the truth about these sham audits and to protect our elections from further interference. But it should not just be Democrats who stick up for America's elections. I urge my Republican colleagues to follow the lead of our brave witnesses from Maricopa County by putting country over party and finally renouncing Trump's big lie. I want to thank our panelists for being today. Thank you so much for your testimony. And I now recognize the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Comer, for his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for holding today's hearing, because half of America has questions about the integrity of our elections. Democrats unilaterally changing the rules in the middle of those elections, like what happened last summer, does nothing to answer the questions that 50% of Americans have with respect to the integrity of last year's elections. It's important that the American public have confidence in election results, so states and counties should be transparent and open to outside audits. I hope today's hearing helps answer some outstanding concerns regarding election integrity. Unfortunately, today's hearing is the continuation of two troubling trends from this committee. The first trend is the Democrats' obsession with avoiding any actual oversight of the Biden administration. If you don't believe me, just look at the actions. This committee has held less than half the number of hearings they did when President Trump was in office. This committee has had less than half as many witnesses from the administration. And this committee hasn't held a single hearing on the border crisis, or on the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, or on the illegal leaks at the IRS, or on the origins of COVID-19, or on many other important topics like the border security crisis. The second trend is the Democrats' current obsession with investigating anything coming out of the states. Recently, we've had hearings on voting rights and abortion, both solely because of laws passed in a single state. Today, we're having a hearing about election integrity based solely on an audit that occurred in a single state. Each of these issues, abortion rights, voting rights, election integrity, are issues that have long been known to be handled at the state level. Yet this committee cannot resist wading into state issues, attempting to trample all over the 10th Amendment. With that, I want to yield the balance of my time to Mr. Biggs, who's been on the front lines in Arizona on this issue from the very beginning.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I thank the chair today for having this hearing. You know, the Democrats really can't have it both ways, can they? I mean, really, can they have it both ways? You cannot say that the audit showed the integrity of the election, while at the same time claiming that the mere fact of an audit in and of itself is a threat existentially to our democracy. You can't do that. It's a fallacious, logical inconsistency. If, as you claim, by the way, claim I dispute, that the election was fair and properly conducted, a complete forensic audit ought to demonstrate that, which is what you assert. That's what you are asserting here today. But at the same time, you're saying, well, while the audit confirms what we think it did, when you cherry pick some of the statements from the audit report, you're also saying that an audit undermines the election integrity. Do you see the inconsistency of your position? If there are questions as to the accuracy of the election, a forensic audit will reveal the questionable outcomes and problems that need to be cured going forward, and the legitimacy of the election may be compromised. Dems and leftists have been highly critical of this audit even before it began. They had an agenda, and the chairwoman mentioned this agenda today so that all of you are participating here, you can support this agenda. She said they don't think legislative changes should be made. That's what she said. That's why we're doing this today, because they think any legislative changes are not appropriate. Well, in 2018, in Maricopa County, most of you may not know this, there was such problems with the Maricopa County election that the Democrat county recorder, who is the elections official for the county, Adrian Fontes, got to go under scrutiny by this Board of Supervisors, the 2018 Board of Supervisors, who took everything back from him that they possibly could legally and statutorily. That's the history of problems in Maricopa County in our voting. Looking from the outside, the election process in Maricopa County was fraught with problems. If your claim was that the audit wasn't in order, you must acknowledge several broad observations of the auditors that they made with regard to this audit. It's everything from procedure and conduct or misconduct on the part of the board and specific elected officials. You cannot argue that the question regarding election integrity from the right is an attack on our democracy, our constitutional republic, especially after 4 years of the Democrats claiming that the 2016 presidential election was stolen because of Russian interference. Here's what a member of this committee said. Mr. Raskin from Maryland said, quote, "I would love to challenge the Electoral College vote because our election was badly tainted by everything from cyber sabotage by Vladimir Putin to deliberate voter suppression by Republicans in numerous swing states." That's what he said. And we went through literally 4.5 years, right up to the start of the November voting, the early balloting in Arizona, of Hillary Clinton and her supporters in the media saying that the 2016 election was stolen by Republicans. It is no secret that if you go back and look at polling data, everything from the Bush v. Gore era forward, the party whose candidate was not successful asserted that the election was not fair and impartial. No secret. Every polling outlet from that point, 2001, right on up to 2020, claimed that. I advocated for a full forensic audit because I felt like election integrity should be restored. One of the biggest things that I find problematic here is that the two statutory minimum audits committed to by the County Board of Supervisors that were done could have been easily expanded in a timely fashion to a full forensic audit. It chose not to do it. Spent $18,000 for those two audits, but spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, multiple lawsuits to prevent the audit that we're discussing today. And ultimately, the bottom line is we're here because this chairwoman and the Democrats don't want to see any kind of legislative change. I believe that there needs to be legislative change probably in Arizona. I don't know what's going on in other states, but other folks tell me that in their states there needs to be legislative change too. That's why we're here, is because the chairwoman would like to see legislative change scuttled. And I, for the life of me, don't understand why this committee thinks that it has the constant obligation to interfere in what is patently a state issue. With that, Madam Chair, I thank you, and I yield back.